Hello, everyone. Let's subscribe to Relationship Stories before we forget. You won't want to miss what's coming up next. Alex had always trusted Sophie, believing their 6-year marriage was built on love and loyalty. But that trust was shattered the day he uncovered her affair, a betrayal that went far beyond just sex.
It started as a whisper, a nagging thought that Alex couldn't quite shake. For weeks, he had sensed that something was wrong between him and his wife, Sophie. Their marriage of 6 years had always been strong, or so Alex thought. But lately, there was a distance, a subtle change in the way Sophie interacted with him. She seemed distracted, always on her phone, and her excuses for late nights and sudden errands felt rehearsed, hollow. At first, Alex tried to ignore it, blaming work stress, telling himself that their busy lives were to blame. But the feeling grew, gnawing at him day and night, until he couldn't sleep without wondering where Sophie truly was, or who she was with. Every touch felt forced, every smile looked like a mask. His gut told him that something was wrong, terribly wrong. Then came the moment that shattered his world. One afternoon, Alex was supposed to be out of town for business, but a forgotten file brought him home early. The house was quiet, too quiet. Sophie's phone, carelessly left on the coffee table, buzzed with incoming messages. His heart pounded as he picked it up. There, on the screen, were messages from someone named Ryan. Flirtatious, intimate messages. And the more Alex scrolled, the worse it got. Photos exchanged, plans made, meetings detailed. The timestamps told a story of betrayal stretching back months. In that instant, everything Alex thought he knew about his marriage crumbled. But he didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, he felt a cold anger settle inside him. This wasn't just an affair. This was a war, and Sophie and Ryan had no idea who they were up against. For weeks, Alex lived a life of silent agony, masking the rage and pain that gnawed at him relentlessly. Every smile he gave Sophie, every casual conversation, was a facade, a bitter performance in a marriage that had become nothing but a lie. But while Sophie believed her secrets were safe, Alex was quietly preparing for the moment he would dismantle everything she held dear. The private investigator Alex hired was thorough. Each day brought fresh details, painful confirmations of Sophie's betrayal. Hotel visits, intimate dinners, whispered exchanges. It all painted a picture of two people so deeply entwined in their affair that Alex's existence had become a distant afterthought. The investigator provided photos and videos, some capturing Sophie in moments that cut Alex to his core. But it was one particular video that shattered Alex's already broken heart. A call between him and Sophie, seemingly innocent, was anything but. He remembered that day, calling Sophie from the office, just checking in as he usually did, completely unaware of what was happening on the other end. The investigator's footage showed it all. Sophie answered Alex's call while Ryan was still inside her, her lover's hands gripping her body from behind as she put on her sweetest voice to speak to her husband. Alex could hear his own voice on the recording, asking her how her day was, oblivious to the obscene betrayal happening in real time. In the video, Sophie's face was a mask of pleasure as she spoke to Alex, her breathing controlled, as if nothing was out of the ordinary. She glanced back at Ryan with a smirk, biting her lip as she muted the phone momentarily to stifle a moan. Ryan's hands never left her hips, pulling her closer while she reassured Alex that she was just running errands and that she'd see him later. The call ended, and Sophie giggled, turning her full attention back to Ryan as if Alex had never existed. Alex watched that video over and over, each time feeling as though a dagger was twisting deeper into his chest. It was a betrayal so complete, so casually cruel, that it left him numb. The woman he had loved, the woman he had trusted with every part of his life, had desecrated everything sacred between them. She hadn't just lied. She had reveled in her deceit, taking pleasure in the fact that Alex had no idea what was happening behind his back. But that wasn't the worst of it. As more videos arrived, Alex uncovered another layer to Sophie's betrayal, one that felt even more personal, more devastating. There, on his screen, was Sophie, indulging in acts she had explicitly denied him for years. He remembered their conversations vividly, Alex had once asked Sophie about trying something new in their intimacy, anal, but she had recoiled in disgust, telling him she hated the idea, that it was revolting and not something she would ever enjoy. Her words had left him embarrassed, making him feel like a deviant for even suggesting it. But now, here she was, giving that part of herself to Ryan, the very thing she had withheld from Alex for all these years. And she wasn't just doing it reluctantly. The footage showed her moaning with pleasure, her body trembling as she gave herself completely to Ryan. The investigator captured it all. Her ecstatic face, her hands gripping the sheets, the way she urged Ryan to keep going. She loved every moment of it, every second filled with the kind of passion she had never shown Alex. Alex's mind reeled. It wasn't that Sophie hated it, it was that she hated the idea of doing it with him. The betrayal cut deeper than just the physical act. It was a revelation of her disdain for him, a preference for another man that she had never vocalized but was now unmistakable in her actions. She had saved that side of herself, the passion and lust, for someone else. The same woman who had told Alex that it was revolting had given herself eagerly to Ryan in ways that Alex had only dreamed of. Night after night, Alex sat in the dark, scrolling through the videos, his pain giving way to something darker. Every detail burned into his memory. Her breathless voice, her trembling body, the way she smiled at Ryan, the way she lied to him so easily, so effortlessly. The betrayal was absolute. Sophie had torn their marriage apart in ways Alex hadn't thought possible, leaving no part of his dignity untouched. And now, as he stared at the growing mountain of evidence, Alex knew one thing for certain. They would both pay for what they had done. Sophie and Ryan had taken everything from him. His trust, his love, his pride. And now he was going to take everything from them. When Alex finally made his move, it was nothing short of calculated destruction. After months of careful planning and preparation, the day came when he initiated divorce proceedings without so much as a hint. Sophie, unsuspecting and still living in her illusion of control, was blindsided when she received the official paperwork. For a moment, she thought it was a mistake. Surely, Alex wouldn't just leave her like this. He was too rational, too understanding. She had underestimated him. Sophie called him immediately, frantic and confused. Her voice trembled as she offered apologies, her words dripping with desperation. She begged for a chance to explain, to salvage what was left of their marriage. She even tried to paint the affair as a moment of weakness, a mistake they could overcome. But Alex, now fully in control, wasn't having any of it. He listened to her hollow excuses with a calm exterior, letting her think she had a chance, until he spoke.
I know everything, Sophie. Every lie, every betrayal. You think you can apologize and make it right? It's too late for that.
Her attempts to negotiate crumbled as she realized Alex wasn't going to be swayed. And yet, Sophie couldn't let go. She asked, no, begged, for a meeting. She needed to explain, to somehow make Alex understand that it wasn't what it seemed. Ryan had been a distraction, nothing more, a fling that had spiraled out of control. She told herself that she could fix this, that if Alex just listened, they could somehow salvage what was left of their marriage. Sitting across from him in the living room, Sophie could feel the tension crackling between them, but she pressed forward, desperate to undo the damage.
Alex, please!
Sophie began, her voice shaky, hands clasped in front of her as if she could hold the pieces of their broken life together.
I know I've made a terrible mistake, but it didn't mean anything. Ryan was just a distraction. It wasn't serious, it never was.
Alex's eyes were cold, his expression unreadable as he stared at her. He had heard enough excuses to last a lifetime, but he let her talk, waiting, the silence heavier with each passing second.
Ryan didn't mean anything?
Alex's voice was calm, almost too calm.
You expect me to believe that? That everything I've seen, everything you did, meant nothing?
Sophie blinked back tears, nodding quickly.
It was a fling, Alex. It wasn't about you. I got caught up in something stupid. It's over now.
Alex leaned forward, his face inches from hers, his voice low and dangerous.
How long? Sophie, how long has this been going on?
He asked, his words cutting through her excuses. Sophie hesitated, her breath catching in her throat.
A few months. But it wasn't serious.
A few months.
Alex's voice rose, disbelief and anger finally seeping through his carefully held composure.
You've been lying to me for months, sneaking around with him, and you expect me to believe it wasn't serious? How many times, Sophie? How many times did you sleep with him?
Sophie shook her head, her hands trembling.
I don't know, Alex.
How many times?
Alex's voice boomed, cutting her off, his fists clenched so tight, his knuckles turned white. Tears spilled down Sophie's cheeks as she stammered.
A dozen times maybe? I don't know.
Alex recoiled, his eyes narrowing in disgust.
A dozen times? Jesus, Sophie. Are you still taking me for a fool?
But something in him snapped at that moment. He knew Sophie's patterns too well, her desires, her appetite. A dozen times didn't even scratch the surface of the truth. Alex knew the woman sitting in front of him, knew how often she craved intimacy. In their own marriage, Sophie had always demanded at least 2 rounds per session, 4 times a week. He began to piece together the reality of her affair, coldly calculating the truth. Sophie had met Ryan, a man 10 years younger than Alex, almost every day. 6 days a week, sometimes even on weekends when Alex had been out golfing. With someone as young as Ryan, Sophie's appetite would have been stronger, just like it had been in the early days of their own marriage. Alex's voice grew colder as he continued, his eyes darkening with realization.
A dozen times? Let's stop pretending. You met him 6 days a week, didn't you? And let's be real, once per session wasn't enough for you, was it? I know how you are. With Ryan, it was probably 3 or 4 times each time you saw him.
Sophie's face went pale, the tears freezing as she realized what Alex was doing.
So let's do the math, Sophie.
Alex said, his voice bitter, cutting.
6 days a week. 6 months. 4 times per session. That's around 720 times, Sophie. 720 times you chose him. Do you realize that's more times than we even had dinner together in the past year?
Sophie's lip trembled, her hands covering her face as she broke down in sobs.
Alex, I didn't mean to hurt you. It wasn't like that.
Wasn't like what? You've been screwing him nearly every day for 6 months. Don't sit there and pretend like it was just a fling, like it meant nothing.
I wasn't thinking. I got caught up in it. He's younger, and I was lost. But it wasn't about you.
Lost? You weren't lost 720 times. 720 times! And now I'm supposed to believe it meant nothing?
Alex displaying all of his hurt, his anger, his confusion, and all kind of emotions crashing onto him at the same time.
Alex, I love you. I swear, I love you. You were enough. You've always been enough.
Enough? If I were enough, you wouldn't have done this. And don't tell me you love me. If you did, you wouldn't have done this to me. How many times did you come home to me, still carrying him inside you? How many times, Sophie? How many times did you walk through that door and want me to sleep with you right after him? How many times did you have him inside you, and then want to mix his seed with mine? How many times did you give me his sloppy seconds?
The word, sloppy seconds, hung in the air like a poison, and Alex could feel the rage building in him, a rage so intense it felt like it would consume him. It was the ultimate insult, the ultimate degradation, a man's pride, his dignity, destroyed by the woman he loved.
How many times, Sophie? How many times did I touch you, while you still had him all over you? How many times did I unknowingly share you with him? Tell me!
Sophie couldn't answer. She collapsed onto the floor, knowing she had come undone. all is ending, and she sobbed uncontrollably.
Please, Alex, I'm begging you. I didn't mean for this to happen. It didn't mean anything, I swear. I'll do anything, just don't leave me.
But Alex's heart had already turned to stone. There was no coming back from this. No apology, no tears could erase the image of her with Ryan. The number 720 burned into his mind like a brand. There was no coming back from knowing how many times he had been disrespected, how many times he had unknowingly shared his wife. Without another word, Alex turned and walked away, leaving Sophie in the ruins of their marriage, sobbing on the floor, knowing that she had destroyed everything beyond repair. And Sophie was about to learn how much more she was going to lose. By the time Sophie fully realized the depth of Alex's plan, it was too late. She tried to hold on to the life they had built, but Alex had left no room for negotiation. He had been methodical. While she was busy with her affair, Alex had been quietly siphoning off their shared assets, securing everything of value out of her reach. The house, which had been the pride of their life together, was no longer hers. The business, which she had thought they both owned, was safely in Alex's name, a move he had executed months before. Even the joint accounts were drained, leaving Sophie with little more than the clothes on her back and the bitter taste of regret. In a panic, Sophie tried to fight back. She hired lawyers, hoping to salvage something, anything, from the wreckage. But Alex had anticipated every move. His evidence of her infidelity, detailed and undeniable, made sure that Sophie would get nothing in the divorce settlement. The courts sided with Alex, and her lawyer quietly advised her to settle quickly. There was no winning this. For Sophie, the reality set in like a slow-rolling nightmare. She was forced to move out of their lavish home within weeks, taking up residence in a small, dingy apartment far from the comfortable life she had once known. Her friends, those who hadn't already turned their backs on her after hearing the truth, became distant. The shame of her affair spread quickly through their social circle. Where once she had been respected and admired, she now found herself whispered about, judged, and abandoned. The life she had built with Alex crumbled faster than she ever thought possible. Her family, once her support, was ashamed of her, avoiding her calls and leaving her to navigate her newfound isolation alone. Sophie, who had once thought she could salvage her marriage and her dignity, now stood at the bottom, watching the pieces of her life fall apart. But her fall wasn't over yet. While Sophie's life was unraveling, Alex made sure that Ryan wouldn't escape unscathed either. Ryan had always been a man on the rise, handsome, 10 years younger than Alex, with a promising career and a seemingly perfect family. To the outside world, he was the golden boy, admired by his colleagues and respected by his community. But that image was about to be shattered. Alex had gathered all the evidence needed to not only expose Ryan's affair with Sophie but also to destroy his career. The investigators' reports were damning: photos of hotel rendezvous, receipts for trips disguised as business meetings, and texts that would make any spouse's blood boil. Ryan hadn't just betrayed his wife, he had misused company resources to fund his affair. With cold precision, Alex anonymously sent the evidence to Ryan's employer, framing it as a concern about workplace misconduct. The corporate ethics department acted swiftly. Ryan, who had once been on a fast track to promotion, was summoned to an urgent meeting. They confronted him with the evidence, photos, receipts, and records of his secret trips. His usually confident demeanor crumbled under the weight of undeniable proof. His boss, once his biggest supporter, was now disgusted. The HR team informed Ryan that his behavior was a violation of company policy, and he was immediately terminated. There would be no severance package, no recommendations, just a swift and humiliating exit from the company. But Alex wasn't done. He knew Ryan's perfect family was next on the list to crumble. The same package of evidence found its way to Ryan's wife, delivered anonymously. When she opened it and saw the photos and messages, her world shattered. Their marriage, once envied by many, dissolved overnight. She filed for divorce, taking their children and a significant portion of Ryan's remaining assets with her. Ryan, once the golden boy with everything to lose, had now lost it all: his career, his family, and his reputation. The whispers that followed Sophie also followed him. Colleagues distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with someone who had not only betrayed his wife but also brought shame to the company. But Alex wanted more than just personal revenge. He wanted their downfall to be public and irreversible. He waited for the right moment, biding his time until the divorce was finalized and the legal matters were settled. Then, with one last act of vengeance, he anonymously leaked the evidence of Sophie and Ryan's affair online. Photos, videos, texts, it all went viral. Within hours, their private betrayal became a public scandal. Their names, once whispered in social circles, were now plastered on forums, blogs, and social media. Sophie, who had once prided herself on her image, was utterly destroyed. She couldn't walk down the street without hearing the whispers, seeing the judgment in people's eyes. Ryan, once the charismatic executive, was publicly shamed, his career prospects evaporating in an instant. For both of them, the humiliation was complete. Their lives, once filled with promise and success, had crumbled to ruins. Alex walked away from the wreckage of his marriage with his dignity intact. Sophie and Ryan had taken everything from him: his trust, his pride, his sense of stability, but Alex had taken far more from them. He had destroyed their careers, their reputations, their social standing. And most importantly, he had made sure they would never forget the cost of their betrayal. Sophie, living in her small apartment, alone and ostracized, had nothing left but her regrets. Ryan, a shadow of the man he once was, faced the same fate, alone, despised, and ruined. Alex, however, rebuilt his life. Stronger, wiser, and more focused, he moved forward without the baggage of Sophie's lies weighing him down. He was free now, free from the betrayal, free from the people who had wronged him. And as far as Alex was concerned, justice had been served. But at what cost? Would Alex recover from this trauma and move on? That's the story I've shared with you today. If you enjoyed it, make sure to check out my playlist for more similar stories.